Today's guest is John Many. He's joining us here on Lead with Giants TV. My name is Tal Schnell, and I welcome you guys to watch this special interview. And John, just to introduce him as well, he is the author of the Disciplined Leader-52 Concise, Powerful Lessons. John, welcome to our show.
Hey, good morning. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. I know you're doing a lot of good things right now with your book out, and we appreciate your time and patience with us. I know you've been doing a lot of webinars, and it's great stuff, and so our audience will look forward to your tips on leadership today.
Great.
Good. Liz, welcome to our show. Glad to have you.
It's great to be here with you, Tal and John. I'm excited.
Excellent, excellent. So let me introduce John for some of you who may not know him. John Manning is the president of Management Action Programs, Inc., MAP, a general management consulting firm based in Southern California. Since 1960, MAP has tapped its talent and expertise to help 170,000 leaders in over 15,000 organizations nationwide, creating breakthrough results. John has diverse experience in business leadership, having held executive positions in Fortune 500 companies in operations, marketing, and sales. Formerly the director of operations for McKesson Water Products, Inc., he was also part of a leadership team that took the company national. He is the author of The Disciplined Leader, Keeping the Focus on What Really Matters. And we're going to learn today about what does it take to be a disciplined leader with John. And John, let me kind of start the conversation. You know, when we think about discipline, usually there comes up negative thoughts, or we think about punishment, or we're thinking about someone has some sort of a strict policy around the office. They want to make sure that we're disciplined. But you have a different view, and obviously you've spoken to several leaders and executives in their field and industry and kind of going around. But as it turns out, discipline is not so negative, especially when it comes to leadership. So talk to us about that.
That's a great question, because as I talked about in the book, when I went out and asked trusted colleagues and friends, hey, define disciplined leadership, they were all over the board. And to your point, some of them were negative. But we felt it was important in the book, and for people to get the most out of the book, to really define that up front. So we define discipline as a consistent application of certain mindsets and actions to achieve success. And there's some key words in there. The idea of being consistent. Being a leader that consistently applies good habits every time they come to work and every time they approach their business, and how fundamental that was to the success of the people that we worked with over the past 55 years. And we sort of try to capture our 55 years of experience in the book in terms of what are those consistent habits and activities that people were doing to be successful.
That's great. So let's talk about some of those habits and practices. What does this, disciplined leadership looks like? If I wanted to be a disciplined leader, what do I need to practice? What do I need to hone as a leader?
That's a great question. I think the foundation for that is something that's a mantra of our company. Just a little background on us in terms of our consulting expertise. The founders of our companies realized right off the bat, when they did studies out there with entrepreneurs and business owners and leaders, that although they had disciplined systems in place for things like accounts payable, customer service, and all the quality things, when it came to leadership and management of a company or an organization, those same disciplines weren't there. So it's almost like they didn't see that as a disciplined process in terms of how do I lead my company or my organization. So the bedrock of that is really around what we talk about is focusing in on the vital few and ignoring the many, which is really that Pareto principle. It's that 20% of activities that really drive 80% of our results. And that's the foundation for what we talk about in terms of being a disciplined leader, in terms of that being the mantra, and the mantra of being disciplined. And if you think about it in today's world, and everybody's busy out there, and all the people I saw some of the interviews that you've done, everybody's busy doing so many things, and there's so much noise out there. But the idea, if I can cut through that, really identify those 20% that's really going to drive my results, I can be successful. And that's either in business, in life, even in your life.
Great. I didn't know you were watching my interviews, but thank you so much. I appreciate that going into that. But, what I try to do, and I think that you're combining a couple of thoughts, and I'll let Liz ask the question here as well, because she's, we're all impacted by time management, and, leaders always asking, or managers are always I think in the back of their mind, they're asking, is what I'm doing, whatever their percentage
Sure.
is that really contributing? And I'm not talking about the bottom line. I'm talking about relationships. I'm talking about inspiring employees, engagement, that
Right.
sort of thing. I know I ask these questions, and as we move away from the what I call the left brain of leadership, we're moving into some other aspects of leadership we'll talk about soon. But just like with anything else, to interviews and so forth, is how can I add value in the productive or constructive time that it's allowed to me, and
Right.
that's what we're trying to do. Liz, go ahead. I know we've got questions for John.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Yeah. Hi, John. So, as we start out, we all have different priorities. Can you maybe talk about how we can come to a consensus on what that 20% is? Because often in a business
Yes.
we have several, stakeholders that are making decisions.
Absolutely. And it's a great question. And it's probably the question I've been asked the most is, well, that sounds all great on paper, but, how do I identify my vital few? And I think it starts with what's the goal. So, for example, there's different, you have a vital few like you talked about in your business, you might even in your life. So, like at a job level, if you're responsible, the way to really tie back to what my vital few are is to really say, well, starting off, always asking yourself, what's the goal? So, for example, you have this program right now. I would imagine this is one of your vital few because you're engaged with me and we're actually delivering this program and getting it ready to produce, right? But there's probably a lot of other stuff that you do during the day, answering emails, phone calls, all those things that happen around you. And as I talked about earlier, there's so much noise, right? But people, it's their ability to really focus on activities that drive their vital, that drive their results. So, for example, if I'm responsible for a revenue target, and I'm engaged in creating and driving revenue, and I'm really focused on the goal, then I'm on my vital few. But a lot of times people get caught up in reporting and all that noise and all these other things. And I don't know about you. Have you had one of those days where you're driving home and you're thinking, what did I really get done today? I mean, I have those days here. I'm like, what did I get done? I'm driving home and I'm thinking, all I did was I was on the phone, I answered some emails, I had a distraction, I had a crisis. But when it came to like our goals at our company, one of my goals, for example, is talent. I got to bring new talent in here. So when I'm engaged in the hiring process, or I'm interviewing a new consultant, I'm on my vital few because that's one of my main goals this year. But there's days where go by where I'm not focused on the activities. And the other thing I tell you is that life, you have a vital few. So for example, I think we both agree if you're sitting on the couch watching TV, you're not focused on your vital few, right? But things like your health, your family, your finances, those are your vital few. And what we've learned about disciplined leadership, that it extends, as we talk about in the book in the third part, you extend your impact even beyond your company to your community. And the ability to stay focused on your vital few is paramount to your success. And people who can cut through the noise and find, and what I do is, and maybe you had this experience, is when you realize you don't have a productive day, then you sort of rededicate yourself and say, tomorrow I'm really going to get focused.
Fantastic. A little bit easier said than done sometimes, but
exactly.
Thanks, John.
Okay.
John, let's talk about one. I think you can agree with me that one of the biggest challenges in leadership today is that at least several people that I'm engaged with, managers in the hospitality business and other industries, is that they want to lead high performance teams, but they're not sure how to get that. It's no longer about them, it's about the team. So that's the biggest transition. I want you to talk to us, to our audience, as we have actually several managers and leaders in the community, and how do we gain that credibility and engagement with building that high performance team?
Jeez, that's such a great question. I mean, because that whole the key word that I heard in there was that whole idea of how do I engage my team?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's to the heart of our success in some ways, because we live and die by the results of our team, right? We don't do it all ourselves. And even in the hospitality industry, the performance of that team and how well, they deliver their customer service and all that, really, you're going to live and die on that, because in today's world, there's so many choices. But I would say one of the important parts of engagement that we talk about, and we have a whole chapter in the book on this. There's a couple of areas, but one of them is this whole idea of accountability, and not in a negative sense around, but more about that we define accountability as measuring performance and taking appropriate, timely, corrective action when you're off on your results. And accountability is really, for me, the fundamental truth is when I can get back to the vital few, but when I can get my team aligned to the vital few of the organization and really get them focused on what really matters and get them on the same page, how powerful is that in terms of a way to engage people and to align them, that whole idea of alignment. And again, to the point Elizabeth made, sometimes that's easier said than done, but that's what we work on here. We want to align people, because the truth is, what we found out about, and you probably know this from your business experience, is that most people want to be held accountable. They want to be engaged. They want to make a difference. And if you look at, we talk about the idea of intrinsic, what really motivates people. Money isn't the number one motivator for people to come to work. They want to make a contribution. They want to make a difference. And so our experience is that the idea of having accountability, and not just to measure the numbers, but also the values of that organization and recognize people for when they do a good job, is a great way to engage people and create that team environment.
I want you to talk about a little bit, and I know some people who are watching this can say, well, how do I get to the vital few? If we're building our organization and our culture around that, and we're putting this accountability, there, how do we establish those vital few? Talk to us about that.
I think, again, it goes back to the starting point for identifying the vital few at an organizational level is really understand what are the goals of that organization. What are they trying to do? Are they trying to expand market share? Are they trying to develop a competitive advantage by the level of service they provide? Are they trying to be the low-cost leader? Or what are their revenue targets? What is their growth numbers? And I think it all starts with really spending, that executive team or management team really spending the time to define what are the core goals of that company. Because without that, you have no direction. Having those goals will naturally form direction for you in terms of, okay, now that we have a good umbrella, and it sounds so simplistic, right? But sometimes you'll ask people, when you'll ask them, what's the goals? And an entrepreneur sometimes will say, well, they're right up here in my head. It's like sometimes they're missing those fundamentals. One of the things I wanted just real quickly to point out is that some people have said to me, well, this idea of discipline is boring. For a company needs to be looking for the newest idea. And I don't think that discipline's boring at all. In fact, I think it's a vehicle for a company to be great, because if they can't do these fundamentals well in terms of goal alignment, accountability, and executing, they can't take on those other things that maybe they desire to do, to take that next step. And what we found with entrepreneurs is a lot of times they have a vision of where they want to take their company, like they can see it, but they run into those obstacles, and a lot of times those obstacles is about being more disciplined around what you said, how do I align and engage my team?
Well, I think I've got a great idea for your next book.
Okay.
It's going to be called The Disciplined Organization, or company, exactly, or business, whatever. But I want to kind of tag on some of these points, because one is you've mentioned the behaviors and values, and my question always, when working with other leaders and being in the field, I do some coaching as well, is that I ask the question, how do they show up in your business? How do they show up in your family? How do they show up in your relationships with your friends? And that's kind of the litmus test of values. How do they really show up in your life? And then the other thought is, I think that what most people don't see is discipline. And I think that the reason I say this is because we actually had a guest on our show, and he was the former executive vice president for Disney World. And someone approached him and said, you know, gosh, your organization is just like working in the military. He said, well, the military is one of the top organizations in the world, and it's because it's disciplined, there's some structure, there's some things that's happening behind the scenes to create Disney World as it is maybe from the outside. You don't see those things, but it occurred to me that you were saying that is that the best organizations and the best leaders that are behind the scenes, they may not see that, but they have discipline on a day-to-day basis. Is that what you kind of gather in your research?
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point about living your values, how critical is that to this whole idea that we've been talking about today? The fact that you're consistent, your consistent approach to how you treat people, how you run your business, and how your values should not just be things on the wall, but something that sort of guides and shapes those decisions you make about how you manage your team. And, the truth is, everything we're saying about the whole idea about yourself, and now we're into our team, is that when you make that happen, you attract followers to you. Instead of repelling people away from you, this idea of being consistent about how you behave and how you react, having good values and then also aligning your behavior to that and being consistent at that gives people an opportunity that work for you to be able to manage your expectations because they know who's showing up every day.
Right.
And I don't know if you've ever worked for a boss that maybe was inconsistent about that, but it's like you think to yourself, who's showing up today? Like, is it Dr.
Right.
Jekyll or Mr. Hyde, or is he or she going to be this way?
Right.
And it's really a difficult situation. So I think living your values, to me, integrity is really about somebody with integrity is somebody who actually consistently lives their values. They have integrity because their stated values, they're in alignment with that.
Right. Part of what we do is actually Liz is on my mastermind group, and we talk about those things. So I want to have Liz ask a question about. I know that we're always talking about integrity and accountability, and then establishing those integrity means that do I do what I say, and so forth and so on. So Liz, what question do you have regarding that, maybe?
Well, John, I'd like you to share your thoughts about, okay, it's one thing for us at a leadership level to establish our integrity. How can we kind of set the example, invest in our employees, and really inspire them to bring their integrity levels up to meet ours?
God, and that is just so important, Elizabeth. I think for me, let's just go back to accountability, because this is where a lot of companies miss this opportunity. When you're creating a culture of execution and accountability, I think one of the things that people miss is the measure, the idea of how are my employees aligning to my values. And so when we have, like a lot of our companies or a lot of our clients, we have what we call a monthly, well, I'll just say it's an accountability meeting we have monthly. And we talk about some examples in the book. But at those meetings, while we're going through the numbers and saying how we're doing, we're also measuring how people are performing against the values of the company. And it's people miss that opportunity to sort of recognize people for aligning to the values of the company. And, I think people love to be recognized. And if you really want to reinforce, what's important, if you want to make it important, values important, then you have to reinforce people that do well. Now, I'll give you one other great example. When I worked for another previous company, we had what we called a kudos forum, and it was really all about values. And it was an opportunity where if you had a coworker who was demonstrating the vision and the values of the company, you could write up this quick sheet, this kudos form, just put their name on it. You'd say, here's what they did to demonstrate the values. And it sounds simple, but it really caught on, and people loved it. So, you got this like quick recognition. So there's other things you can put in place, but I think the most important thing to your point is whatever you do, you can't just put it on the wall. You can't just say it. You've got to get your team involved in it. So.
That's great suggestions. So, John, thank you so much for joining us. We've covered quite a bit, and we really appreciate you. You work for a company that's actually doing some business here in Dallas, in McKesson. They do a lot of things here in Dallas, from what I've noticed. So, but we really appreciate your insights. Hopefully, maybe on your next book too, the Disciplined Organization, you'll come in and do that, because I think that there's a great hunger to be not just a company of one, but a company of many leaders.
Absolutely.
So
it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure talking to both of you today.
Great. Just hang on tight. I'm just going to finish the broadcast. Guys, thank you so much for watching. You can catch some of this, obviously, at your own time. But John has some wonderful resources. Actually, John, tell us about where people can find you and some of the resources that you provide.
Absolutely. If you want to know more about our firm, Management Action Programs, you can just go to mapconsulting.com. So we have a website out there. And if you want to know more about the book, it's available on Amazon.com. It's called The Disciplined Leader. And there's also a book website, thedisciplinedleader.com, if you just want to if you want to learn more about the book. So.
Excellent. Liz, thank you so much for joining us from Utah. We appreciate your contribution.
You're welcome. My pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Let me go ahead and finish now.